Hello, it's another reputation room. We're on to our second Prime Minister. I feel like we're really maturing as a piece of online content. I'm Robin Brandt. I'm here with and Harry from PHA. There is going to be no World Cup discussion in this podcast. Tim, it's too raw, isn't it? It's still too early. Just not in agreement.
Still too angry.
Okay. We are going to touch on, though, Devon Cornwall Police, lessons from the killing of Ann Widdecombe, a little bit about Prince Harry and what's known in the trade as litigation comms. And then I want to talk about how you get sacked at the end. Not about me. We're looking ahead to cabinet reshuffle and, do you go out with a bang? Tim, Devon Cornwall Police got it wrong. It's clear. Can you talk to me about the golden hour in comms, that first hour for any big organisation in the crisis?
Yeah, so the theory is that that's the opportunity to grab the narrative, to make sure that you don't leave a vacuum, to put the information you want to be out there into the public domain. The problem comes when you put information out that then is incorrect, and it's very difficult to recapture the narrative after that. So the balancing act is to respond swiftly, but never to say more than you can be absolutely certain about. And obviously, in this instance, when it looked like terrorism was completely ruled out as a motive for the murder of Ann Widdecombe, only for that later to emerge that it wasn't the case, that made Devon Cornwall Police bluntly look pretty foolish. I think the balancing act is a difficult one sometimes, but the lesson is always never put information in the public domain if you are not absolutely 100% sure about it. It's always better to admit what you don't know rather than try and sometimes say things that you're not entirely sure about but would like to
I
put
mean,
out
the
in the public
pressure on
domain.
them is immense in the post-Southport world, isn't it, in terms of the ethnicity of suspects to get out there. And I mean, Harry, we deal with clients often who don't want to say anything, don't we? But sometimes you get clients who, I want to get out there, I want to say stuff. And actually, you
Mm.
need to rein them in, don't you? And often, actually saying what you don't know is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially in matters that are as sensitive as these cases have been. And I think it's interesting to see that immense pressure that's growing on the police. And the flip side of that, and potentially one of the reasons why, is because Farage, Reform, Zia Youssef in particular, are so keen to get out so early and often before they know the facts. When there's this vacuum of information, Reform are filling it with divisive narrative, which puts a lot of pressure on the police. And you look at this case, Farage came out very quickly, and they often flirt with prejudicing future trials. They're often going out there and floating that line very, very carefully, often as a distraction tactic, as we know with Farage and his 5 million bung.
Tim, what about the S word? I think, Phil Hall, the man who founded the company you work for, said it was the most powerful word in comms, saying sorry. Is it going to be that simple for Devon and Cornwall Police? They can just, apologise for the mistake, and that's the beginning of a reputational rebuild, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be a little bit sort of late for that, but I think there's a more interesting underlying point as well to explore, and that's about the relationship between the police and journalists and the media. And just going back to when I started in journalism in the early 1990s on a local newspaper, part of the job was to go every day to the police station and literally just sit down with the police and talk about what had happened the day before that might be newsworthy. You had those very strong embedded relationships between journalists and police. Now, if we fast forward a generation to the Leveson inquiry, there was a lot of um, concern about the relationship between police and journalists and inappropriate conduct, which then led to a total change in the whole climate where journalists and police were not allowed really to have conversations. And now the police are in a situation where they're grappling with social media and the speed of things that are being put out, which are not in the control of the police and is not in control of the media. I think where we've landed is a situation where they've sort of lost control a little bit of that dialogue sometimes. Whereas there was a time when a lot of this could be briefed off the record to journalists, which would then help inform the wider debate. And to some extent, we're just trying to feel our way back to that sort of territory, which I think in the long term is what's required.
What's your advice this week to your namesake, Prince Harry, in terms of the litigation comms around the big case against the Daily Mail's owners that he lost? He lost the case. Can you lose the case but still win the kind of hearts and minds narrative story, or is that just done and dusted for him?
Well, I think one can. Whether Harry can is another matter altogether, isn't it? Really, he's got a reputation for being the whining prince, for often the "woe is me" narrative. And I think he sort of cemented that in the follow-ups to this case. You know, he almost looks a bit like a conspiracy theorist, sort of saying, you know, it was all a stooge from the start. You know, with the wording of his statement saying, you know, it's roughly what we expected, a whitewash. And what you never want to look like in the fallout from a litigation defeat is a sort of conspiracy theorist, someone who's convinced the world is against them. Because that doesn't add credibility to your case. It doesn't add, and it also doesn't. People don't warm to that. You know, in the fallout from a case in which it hasn't gone your way, there are ways that you can win the hearts and minds, and you can absolutely um, you know, call out the things that you feel are an unfair judgment, things that you feel weren't considered, that you think are important to be considered. You look at the positives in the judgment. If there were any elements of the judgment that went in your favor that you want to highlight, that's always a very good thing to do. And also, I think it's important to look ahead in the aftermath of that. Whether that's saying, you know, we will appeal, we will look at our options, or you know, anything that looks ahead and gives it a forward-looking angle that's positive, I think is always really important in the aftermath of that as well. It's fair to say Harry didn't strike many of those chords.
Tim, what about the issue of criticise? I mean, this is civil proceedings. Sometimes we work with clients and they want to criticise judges or judgments, or we advise them to be quite bold. What about this issue of criticising judges? There's no jury involved in this. I mean, there has been some criticism levelled at Harry for what he said about the judge. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got two former Lord Chancellors who've come out very powerfully and said his comments will be on the pale. I think you're right. I mean, sometimes we have clients who do want to hit back, and that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're going to do that, it has to be very considered. I mean, don't forget that during an 11-week trial, the judge sat through every minute of it. He put together a very considered, very detailed judgment in which he dismissed every single one of the claims. And I think most people would feel it a bit rich for Harry. He was only in court for one part of one day, then to put out a statement, not only questioning the basis of the judgment, but also trying to suggest it was some sort of predetermined establishment stitch up. I think people can see through that. You know, you have to be reasoned in your response and you have to be proportionate. And I don't think he was either.
You know, I sat in some of those proceedings back in my BBC days, and that courtroom it was like someone's front room. It's all soft furnishings. It was really strange. It wasn't kind of wood panelled. All right, let's move on to getting sacked. We're going to wrap up on getting sacked. I've never been sacked. Either of you two ever been sacked? A yes or no will do.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, good. I mean, we're going to have a big cabinet reshuffle, a shake-up with Andy Bowen on Monday. I want to talk about how you get sacked and how you do the comms around getting sacked. Do you go out with in a blaze of glory? Do you say nothing? I mean, I know it depends on the circumstances, but Harry, for you, Rachel Reeves, she rings you up later on and says, I think I know where this is going. What's your advice?
For her, I would say at the stage of her political career, the stage of her wider career, I don't think it would benefit her to go out in a blaze of glory. There's still a potential return to her. I don't think under Burnham's cabinet, but you never know what's going to come following that. She's an ambitious person, clearly. So if you want to leave doors open, it's never wise to go out in a burning glory. Someone who's perhaps a bit later in their career, you know, this is the end of their political journey. Well, you know, potentially going out with a bang is no bad thing if you've got something to say.
But Tim, what about in sport, Tim? I mean, you're bitter. You don't agree with the decision that's been made. They come to you and say, I really want to, I really want to go out in a bang. It's not fair. What's your advice on that?
Well, I suppose the most recent example of that was Harry Maguire when he was left out of the World Cup squad, and he and his family took to social media, and I think it went down pretty badly. I think whatever his feelings, and obviously he was very disappointed, it just did come across as sour grapes. And I think he would be better advised trying to zip it. People can make their own judgments now that the campaign's over, whether it was the right decision or not to exclude him. But yeah, he showed his passion, and I think people liked that. But he also, I think, gave an impression why he wasn't selected, which is that he wasn't necessarily going to be a good squad player if he wasn't included in the starting 11. And I think that was a decision that Thomas Tuchel made, and he was looking for players who would be good squad players. And I think in that instance, probably a dignified silence. And you know what? You can always allow people around you to speak on your behalf, not necessarily family, but colleagues, and make the point in a different and more subtle way.
Friends of Harry Maguire.
Indeed.
I'm glad you ended with some positivity around Thomas Tuchel. It's not the vibe I've been getting from you in the office this week, but nonetheless, we'll just leave it there. Well, look, okay, we're always keen on feedback from anyone watching or listening to us, so please let us know what you think. And the next time you hear from us will be in a new Andy Burnham era, and we're only a few months into the Reputation episode. As ever, thanks for watching.